Today we have a really exciting panel for you guys. We're going to be talking about film financing. So how many of you are looking to raise money for your films? Oh yeah, let's go find that money. Let's find that money, you guys. Well, we have an incredible panel for you today. We were talking earlier, everybody on this panel are Stage 32 educators. Some of you may have even taken some of the webinars or classes. Okay, I'm seeing you guys shaking heads.
Yes.
Some of you guys may have taken the webinars or classes by the people behind me. And these are some of the best in the business. So they're going to be dropping some incredible knowledge on the panel, and then you'll have the ability to ask them questions afterwards today. But we were talking ahead of time, and I'm kind of curious. So by a show of hands, how many of you guys have actually, how many of you have made films before? Oh wow, okay, amazing. How many are just starting out? Okay, so totally fine. Look, all answers are good answers here. This is helping us of where we're going to take the conversation. Budget ranges. How many are working in, say, the micro budget range? Okay. How many are in, say, like the $1 to $3 million range? Okay, let's say like a $10 to $15 million range. Okay.
One over there.
Like 30 million and above? Okay, got it. All right, perfect. US based. All right, how about international? Awesome, so we got everything.
Yeah, good balance.
You guys got a lot to talk about today. All right, awesome. So they're prepared for all of that, and we've got a lot that we're going to talk about. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to turn it over to David Zannoni, who you might have also taken a webinar taught by him. He is also our international liaison for our Stage 32 certification, and he's going to introduce the panelists today. But thanks so much for being here, you guys.
I have mine. Well, thank you very much, Amanda, and welcome everybody. Great to, as always, to have a very international audience. Let's introduce the panel members. We are all Stage 32 educators. We've also worked together in all sorts of circumstances. So, maybe if we start with Tiffany, just introduce yourself.
Of course, yes. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Hope you're enjoying the festival. My name's Tiffany Boyle. I work at a company called Ramo, which is an entertainment law firm that represents primarily producers, financiers, and a handful of writers and directors. I'm not an attorney. I run their packaging and sales arm of their firm, and then I have a production company as well called Vested Interest, which I produce under. So I produced O Canada that was here last year, and I EP Joyland that was here a couple years ago.
Thanks. I'm Grady Craig. I'm an SVP at BondIt Media Capital and the president of its production company, Buffalo 8. Ramo has represented us, their law firm, on almost every single deal we've done. We've co-financed with 3 Point here. We primarily finance tax credits, pre-sales, minimum guarantees, GAP as a debt financier.
Thank you. I'm Viviana Zarragoitia. I'm Senior Vice President at TPC, also known as 3 Point Capital. We're a US-based debt financier as well, doing loans against tax incentives, pre-sales, and also GAP. We've also have offices in London, Vancouver, and Melbourne. And in addition to financing, we do a lot of administrative work built around our expertise of tax credits, including advisory services, brokerage of transferable credits, post-production accounting, and recently we started offering legal delivery as well to expedite receipt of your cash from distributors.
Great, well, thank you, and let's just jump right into it. So, what do you guys consider sort of the budget range, the soft spot for financing independent films, and why? Tiff.
Soft spot for budget range. I don't think there really is one right now. I think historically you would find those different versions. I think everybody has maybe their own version of their budget range, but I don't know that there's like this specific one that people should be fitting into at the moment. I think the good news is there's a lot of ways to kind of be creative with focusing more on like what is your project and what should the budget be based on that versus trying to fit into a specific budget range. Of course, unless you find somebody who says, I want to finance it for X amount, then yeah, fit into that. But I'm seeing things kind of going all over the place from micro up to even 45 to 50 million the past year.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, and from my lens, I'm typically seeing 1 to 3, and then a gap 3 to 6, and then 7 and above. There seems to be a black hole in that 3 to 6 range.
I think whenever we talk about budgets and budget ranges, I mean, each project is different, but I also think it should be based on your experience level. So I always say it's better to fail with less money than more money, especially as you're learning, like in your first couple of films. You know, it's better to do the growing pains of learning how to work in, you know, the sub-million, then graduate to $1 million to 2, then 3 to 4, because there are different nuances and different requirements, especially when you're jumping tiers and dealing with unions. So I would say make the budget as reasonable where you can recoup for your investors and not compromise the artistic integrity of the project.
Great. And I saw there are all sorts of budgets. People make all sorts of films with different budgets in our audience. And I guess, question for you guys, that depending on the budget, also the way films are financed are different. So either it's a bigger budget film may have different sources of financing as compared to a smaller budget. So if we take the 10 to 15 million budget range, how are films typically financed? Viviana, to start with.
Yeah, so I would say budgets of this level usually have some sort of star attached to it where most of your budget is going to pay for this talent. That talent is therefore driving pre-sales. So it's A-list or, you know, B+, A- type of talent that you are then going out, getting a sales agent, getting pre-sales. So if you think of the finance pie, the finance plan, the way those are typically done are there's pre-sales, which you can get that on, tax incentives, maybe a little bit of equity. So it really depends. And those pieces can fluctuate depending on how many pre-sales you get. You can do just foreign and leave domestic open. You can do foreign and domestic backstop, so then you have more debt and a little less equity. But at that budget range, I think it's something that clearly people think has commercial appeal, some star-driven project that is then driving pre-sales.
Okay, and Grady, from your perspective, so the let's say the sort of financing, the source of financing for 10 to 50 million dollar budget films, how do you see that typically being structured?
Yeah, if it's shot internationally, there's greater incentives, I think, outside the U.S. to take advantage of those types of budgets, and that's where you see soft money from, you know, European countries or like grant programs that are government funded. You are seeing the debt against the pre-sales and tax credits, as Viviana mentioned. If it's shot in the U.S., there isn't as strong of tax incentives, but there is a tax deferment policy 181 that we're seeing a lot more often is like the driving force for U.S. production. It's a bit complicated, but it's basically a write-off for high net worths to be able to invest into independent film and write off their taxes at the end of the year.
Okay, and this is, I guess, most of all from a U.S. perspective, right? So if we're talking about putting together a U.S.-sourced film with financing, different financing sources, and potential tax incentives from outside the U.S. But as we have an international audience, so from people from outside the U.S., what sort of financing sources are there? How do films, if they're not U.S. sourced, how do they come together?
I mean, there's a lot of,
Yeah.
you know, co-productions that are very popular because you can have local producers from different countries, so then you can access money from different government bodies who are offering soft money. So that's a big motivator for producers to go abroad, is to then find local producers that they can then access those funds through. However, in terms of whether a star is really going to be dependent on the sales agent, so that doesn't really change whether you're filming domestically or internationally. That's something like who you cast is a conversation that should be had early on with the sales agent, whoever your partner is, to create a viable package that the commercial viability is vetted for and has a chance of recoupment. So I think regardless of where you're filming, that should be something that is discussed early on, because you may have ideas of who you want to cast based on perhaps they're on a series, but they may not have foreign value, so then the package doesn't make sense. And when I say make sense from a financial standpoint.
And talking about and so listening to your advice, my impression is that even if a film project is US sourced, foreign seems to be a vital element of the financing structure. So whether we're talking about tax incentives or co-productions, or maybe even on the distribution side, right? The fact that you have to do pre-sales, which is primarily outside the US, as part of the financing plan. How do you see these? How can producers become creative, basically, to package these films internationally? I guess it depends on the sort of structure, but yeah, different.
How can producers be creative in packaging their projects?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's lots of different ways in using different foreign entities and being creative about it. I think it's also looking at little things that can kind of build you up. So I think a lot of people don't necessarily tap into grants or the ability to work with companies like Film Independent or getting into a Sundance program, because I think those are ways where you can make good connections, but also you may be able to get some money that doesn't necessarily need to be returned in the waterfall and in the budget. That's one way that I feel helps inch you there step by step. And then I think it's trying to become friends with sales agents, or trying to find people who at least know this space a bit more to advise you. The market changes constantly, and I know a lot of people have. I'm not mad at AI, but I am mad at AI that thinks it can figure out sales numbers per territory, because it changes all the time and it's not pulling data in immediate time. So I do feel like really trusting the sales agents in that space. They're the ones meeting with the buyers every day and talking to them constantly. And so to me, that's where building that relationship is really helpful, where you can test some of these questions of who's the cast you should go to, what budget range should you be in, and they're motivated and excited to hopefully come on and be that advocate for you. I don't know if you guys know anything.
Yeah, I'll add one more thing. Like, star power is definitely a driving variable, but so is the genre. Pre-selling dramas is very challenging to do. Pre-selling comedies in the foreign market, that just doesn't translate as well often with sarcasm and language
physical
barriers.
Does.
Yeah, physical,
Yeah.
Of course, family movies and things like that. The constant forces that are pre-sellable are action, sci-fi, thriller, horror, some rom-com, and then blends of those elements. Yeah.
I think everything, especially this industry, is all collaboration, right? So as a financier, we have one obviously lane that we operate in, but I view everyone I work with as a partner. So whether that's the local production services company where you're going to film, whether it's the sales agent, because we rely on you guys for recruitment.
Yeah.
The producer, the lawyers, the bond company, everybody to me is a partner, that if you open yourself up to that mindset, then everyone can potentially help you out to make the best viable package to go out and film, right? Because it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, money, resources. So if you look at all of your partners as experts in their particular lane and you listen to them, you have the best shot at getting something made that is going to hopefully sell and recoup the investors' money, because I think that's always should be the name of the game, regardless of what you are doing, because that sets you up to make the next film and have a chance at a consistent career in doing this.
Yeah, and I can totally relate, and For you who don't know, but my expertise actually collection account management, and so it's the management of the international revenues and the waterfall, and basically we see how important basically the whole puzzle is, and how important it is that people work together, that there's a trust relationship. So also from my perspective, I see how vital the role of the sales agent in the whole structure is, right? The whole financing structure. And also that production, financing, and distribution, they're not like separate pieces, right? They're all connected, they're all interconnected. So, yeah, and I would like to focus a little bit more on the tax incentives, tax credits and tax rebates, which are now seems to be especially for the bigger independent films, vital element of the financing plan. There's the tax incentives on the state level in the US, and there are the international tax incentives. Can you just talk a little bit more about these sort of incentives, and also the choice whether to do it in the US, right, from a US perspective, or in Europe, Hungary or Spain, or even in Latin America, Colombia, Dominican Republic? And
sure, I can take that because that's sort of our bread and butter. But over the years, the filming in the U.S. has become challenging due to guild strikes. Felt like a second pandemic for U.S. filming because it sort of halted everything. So producers, in order to continue filming, got comfortable going abroad, and have now made all of the partners that we've been talking about locally, so they know where they can best maximize their incentives. So in the trend over the years has been clients of ours that used to ask us, where is the best US state to film, are now asking me where's the best country to go film. And a lot of that is driven by the rising cost of filming in the States, the challenges of working with the unions, and also over the years there have been more and more American productions going abroad, so there are a lot of local producers that know how to sort of work with American producers. Because of that, we've opened offices in just this year alone in Australia and Canada to capture more of the market space. Now, the other benefit that a lot of these foreign countries have is that you can tap into a federal incentive plus state ones or provincial ones, so you're getting the best of both, right? Because in the States, you can only take advantage of a state one because there's no federal one. So all of those things have been pushing production abroad, in addition to the fact that you can, depending on where the currency is, your money can stretch further. And then also the fact that if you tie in and shoot in different places, you can then access money from different government bodies as well to then reduce how much pre-sales or how much equity you have to put in. So those are all the trends of why production is going abroad, and that's a continuing trend that we see, and not only for production but also post-production too, where a lot of projects will post overseas.
Thanks. Grady.
I mean, I think that was well said. I mean, the only other point to think about for your tax credit is, does it work creatively for the film, which biome that you're shooting in, the Southwest or the Northeast? And yeah, she covered it. It's federal incentives, state incentives, or provincial incentives, more affordable labor costs, more affordable, equipment and rentals. You obviously sometimes you have to fly out, the talent, and if you have key personnel from LA that you want to use, and that has its own cost to lodge them and everything else that might not qualify for those incentives, but you have to do a cost analysis of what is the net return in the incentive to fly people out or hire crews locally, and do compare contrast of different territories, different states, and what makes sense for your movie.
You mentioned some examples in the US and also outside the US, but which are the popular destinations and why?
Inside the US, a lot of our clients go to Georgia. I think New York can be difficult, takes a long time to pay out. I think others in the U.S., New Mexico's trying, I don't know. New Jersey.
As an alternative to New York.
Yeah, I would say on the outside, a lot of people are trying to figure out Canary Islands more. Canada and Australia are always, there's a reason they have offices there now. And funnily enough, so I actually have a film shooting this fall, and we're getting just so much out of, it's set in New Orleans, and we're shooting it in Malta, which is an insane thing to do. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna do most of it shot in Malta, and we have a plan there, and they have weirdly like a bayou built set. And then we're gonna do one pickup week in New Orleans to get all the shots we need, and that gives us like so much more money than what we would have been able to do if we shot the whole movie in New Orleans. And historically, New Orleans was pretty solid tax incentive as well, and still is, but we just get so much more bang for our buck there.
I will say, to finish the second part of your question, David, is unless you have been able to attach a certain star that elevates the project and gives you pre-sales, and they don't want to leave wherever they live, then it might make sense to shoot it wherever they're comfortable filming, because then the sort of cost-benefit analysis of saying, well, I could go shoot this in another country and get all this tax credit, but I don't get that star, and if I get that star, I can then get pre-sales and get the movie off the ground, and it elevates the project for recoupment, then I think that, to me, as a producer, is a decision worth making to go with that star. Because again, that's really what drives people to see things these days. As you know, with theatrical going down, it's all about eventizing a theatrical release, and most people will go for the star.
My example of that is O Canada. Richard, we were supposed to shoot it in Canada initially, and Richard Gere did not, he wanted to stay in New York to be close to his family. So we had to make that decision, even though it takes a while to pay out. It was something that we had to make that decision. He was important to the film, so we stayed.
Great. Just actually my question was for reason of so maybe more from a financier's point of view. So why are certain countries popular, like Hungary or Spain or Malta? Is it because of the sort of the size of the tax incentive? Is it also because maybe in combination with a very solid local film industry? And also, is there sort of a budget limit as to from what point it starts to make sense to look at tax incentives, and maybe for lower budget films it may not make sense because you have additional costs for bringing people there, etc.
I mean, I think I'll tackle that one, but I think what makes any country's incentive popular, and this goes the same for the States, is, to put it very succinctly, is consistency in time and money, right? So what that means is, because it takes so long to get a film off the ground, and you as a producer, if you're planning it now and you're going to shoot in the fall, you want to know that there is consistency in the timing of when that rebate or incentive is going to come back, because you're going to speak to a financier like me to try and finance it, and we're going to model it based on when we think the timeline is to recoup it. But also consistency in the regulations and what is qualified. So you want to know that if you're going to a certain location, you're going to budget appropriately and do your estimate of what you think your incentive is going to be based on that budget. And you don't want, from pre-production phase to when that incentive comes back, let's say typically at least a year to 18 months for most places on average, you don't want there to be any changes or inconsistencies in any of that timeline, because now you as a production have relied on that, you've then taken out a loan, so your financier has relied on that. So it's really about the best programs that I see are consistent in what is qualified and when that money is coming back. And
simplicity. Like I think about Italy is really hard incentive to cash flow from a financier perspective, because the regulation is crazy, and the administration to take advantage of it is difficult. And sometimes it just comes down to what you're familiar with. Like from our perspective, we haven't done a Hungarian tax credit, and for us to wrap our heads around it, we would really be spending a lot of team resources to delve into that, just like you guys would if you were seriously considering shooting in a country or state that you're totally unfamiliar with.
In terms of budget range, is there does it make sense only as of a certain budget range, or maybe?
To go to other countries, you
Yeah,
mean?
to other countries or tax incentive in general in the US or going to another country.
Yeah, I mean, certain states, certain countries, etc. They will. There are some where you can do it from like $1 of a budget. Some that require you to spend a certain amount in that state or area. So you do have to do that assessment of how big is the budget, how much am I going to spend, is it really worth it, and it's just doing that due diligence and maybe picking a couple places that you think are a good fit and sorting it out from there.
I think also for American producers going abroad, they want to know that there is a local production service company looking out for them, right? Because that's their expertise. Again, viewing everyone in your production as a partner, you want to be able to rely on that production service company to apply for your credit properly, to oversee it, to know that you're going to hit the metrics that you're expecting, and to also just help out in terms of resources and crew and anything labor related or union related locally. So that's where having the right partner comes in. And I think as more and more producers film abroad and these production services companies work on those productions, it makes the barrier to entry lower and it makes it easier. And it's why so many American producers have gotten comfortable filming abroad. And I think the places that you mentioned are sort of known for being, very consistent, very streamlined, very authentic, and very forward as to how the program operates. And so it just makes it easy from a foreigner standpoint when you're going somewhere where you don't speak the language and you're not from there, that saying, it's okay, you're welcome, we'll take care of you.
Great. So if we go to movies, films with a lower budget, so let's take the $1 to $3 million dollar budget range. What's the financing model there?
It can be anything between any of the many different avenues, right? There's equity, there's mezz, there's gap, there's debt, there's tax, grants, etc. Sorry?
Even for $1 to $3 million.
Yeah. I've seen everything across the board. I will say in the 1 to 3 range, most of my clients, and even for myself, the goal would, as much as possible, take advantage of some sort of tax incentive and have just equity. But it can be any of those things. And what I'm noticing on the equity side is, I'm sure you're seeing more and more movies where there's 1 million executive producers, and I am noticing more that it does take more pieces of the pie. People are they're more risk adverse at putting in huge chunks, and they're more willing to put in, a couple $100K pops here and there, and so you have to find a lot more of them. That's a trend that I've seen the past couple of years.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. It takes a village. As we're seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think New Mexico is a great example of a state we see these lower budgets at because there's no minimum qualified spend. So in the 1 to 2, 3, it makes more sense to shoot there than a Georgia where there's a $500,000 minimum qualified spend.
I think at those budget levels too, I think it makes sense to film either where you are or someplace you've already filmed and you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to guess if you're in the 1 to 3, it's either maybe a first time or second time filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not necessarily accessing A-list talent per se, so you're really just trying to make it as reasonable a budget to get it off the ground. So that's why I see, to Tiffany's point, the financial pie being equity and tax credit. I think no matter what budget level, you should be thinking of a tax incentive to take advantage of, otherwise you're leaving money on the table.
Thanks. And are some new filmmakers or recent filmmakers recently started in the audience. How can newer filmmakers position themselves basically? It's more low risk towards financiers if they don't really have the track record. Maybe Grady, you can.
Yeah, we get this question a lot. I saw it on the financing blog on Stage 32. We work with first-time filmmakers, and to get comfortable as an institutional financier with a relatively new director with not much experience is how have they surrounded themselves with other key personnel, from their production accountant to their DP to their line producer to their editor. All of those pieces play a big role for us to, to instill confidence in the executives that are investing in you, that will believe that you can pull off this project on schedule, on budget, with the vision that you sold the distributor on, who you pre-sold the movie. They want to feel comfortable with that too, and how can you mitigate as much risk as possible with the people around you?
Going to things like Film Independent, going to things like Stage 32, getting sometimes other validation in the marketplace, not just the people on your team, but also, okay, you were in this Film Independent program, and that's how we kind of came onto Joyland. Is the director was in the Film Independent program. He had done very well there. He also had a proof of concept, to your point. It was bought, which is very rare for shorts, it was bought by a distributor, by Focus Features, the short. And so for the investors involved in that, they felt a lot more comfortable coming in. And so I think those types of programs are really good. And when I see that somebody's gone through like a Sundance program or a Tribeca program or a Film Independent, it helps me know that they've gotten real training, if you will, and real connections. And I feel more comfortable being able to tell the investor, yes, this is something you should look at.
I think a lot of it is about doing your homework. I mean, in addition to your partners, it's understanding the language and the vocabulary, because when you are approaching someone, everyone is busy, so you want to make that, you only get one shot at a first impression. So you want to educate yourself about, if you're approaching a financier, okay, what type of financier is that? What type of financing are you looking for based on what you have put together? But just understanding those nuances, and there are many resources out there, including Stage 32, to understand that, I think elevates you, because it shows that you've taken the time to learn that person's business and what you have to offer them and how you can work together, right? You need to present yourself as like, you want to be part of my project. I think that's a very subtle shift in the mentality of how you approach people.
Great. So we haven't spoken yet about the streamers. How as a producer, how can you basically finance an independent film if it goes to streamer deal? With Netflix or Amazon, how does that work?
Sorry, if it has a streamer deal or if it does not?
Yeah, if it does have a streamer deal, or if there's interest from a streamer for an independent film, how does it work? How does the streamer get involved from a financing perspective?
It depends. It depends on how are they coming in as an original? Are they going to fully finance it? Are they licensing it? And then they may pay for part of it up front. Otherwise, you may need to go to one of these two lovely people right here to have them finance against that paper, and they'll tell you if they will and how much they'll do that for. But if you actually have a deal on the table, that is the typical process. Is going and finding a lender who feels like they trust that paper, if it's a Hulu, if it's a Netflix, whatever those major players are, and then be able to tell you this is how I'll finance against it. Usually they won't finance the whole piece of that. So then you have to go out and hopefully find something to fill that gap. So that can be equity, that can be a grant, but they'll give you at least a really good portion of it, hopefully. And then you'll be able to fill it.
Yeah, I think typically it's not the streamers pre-buying projects in the independent world. It's an intermediary distributor like Lionsgate or Neon or Vertical, and then once the film was complete, then they're licensing it to a streamer. I have yet to see a streamer really come in and like pre-buy an independent film. At that rate, they might as well just come in and finance it and own the entire IP.
And do you are the streamers still active? Do we see worldwide distribution deals, or do we see more like the independent model financing? What sort of the balance there?
The streamers are much less active than they were a year or two ago. It's funny because they're technically spending, a lot of them are technically spending more money, but I think they're allocating it elsewhere. They're maybe putting it towards sports or live events, things like that. So they are buying significantly less, and it has made distribution, at least in the US, more complicated and hard to see how people are going to come out of recouping. And then I also think that the deals are different. There was a period of time where like that worldwide sale was something that was more common, and a lot of even like the distributors, like the verticals of the world, were building their own foreign sales arms, and that's stopped. A lot of more of the streamers are only buying like one or maybe a couple of territories, and much less the world. It still happens, but it's much less often than it used to be, and we're going back to the older model of territory by territory.
The distributor numbers for pre-buys have gone down in the last 18 months because the streamers are not paying as much or as frequently for product. And so when distributors could reasonably rely on like a Netflix or a Hulu or Amazon to license to pay one window before they even went into production, and because distributors can't rely on that anymore, they have to reduce the amount they're willing to spend on a filmmaker through a pre-buy up front. Just given the uncertainty when that film is done, are they actually going to be able to recoup their MG and land it somewhere that's going to give them a profit, really?
I think in addition to these trends, and when the streamers first came out, they were buying a lot of content, but then they just decided to open up their own production arm. So a lot of the part of the reason they're not pre-buying as much is because they will just invest the money to develop and produce it themselves as well.
Great. Then basically, this of course is we're all talking about independent film financing. I've got just a question I would love to get your thoughts on, and that's basically on Sinners, whereby if the deal that Ryan Coogler did with Warner, if that will change basically the relationship or the landscape for the studios. And just in a nutshell, Ryan Coogler basically did a deal with Warner where he gets a percentage from the box office, from gross. And I guess after 25 years, the rights of the film fully revert back to him. Of course, it's not independent financing, it's studio related, but I'd love to have your thoughts on this.
So prior to my life at TPC, I worked at Lionsgate and Profit Participation. So when I read this, it sort of piqued my interest and gave me flashbacks of that era in my career. I think Ryan Coogler is a bit of an outlier because he did Black Panther that made $1 billion. So not every filmmaker has those opportunities and executes on it to that level. But I think I'm open to whatever new models are out there in terms of doing deals, and whether it's the theatrical experience or how filmmakers recoup and get paid, because I think we're in such a exciting time in the industry because the old models are changing and new ones are coming up about because of all the changes in our industry, that I welcome any new changes or any outside of the box thinking when it comes to creative deal making. So whether I think it's here to stay or not, I'm sure other filmmakers are going to ask for it, but why not? And then there'll be in 25 years probably a trend in relicensing all these films. So I think why not? Let's go for it, because right now is an opportunistic time to try new things and see what works.
Yeah, that's great. And for me, it's sort of the question is this going to be a tendency, or is it just a matter of somebody using this leverage well, right? Grady,
I think using leverage well.
Yeah.
And I think anybody who can do that, who's in that level, more power to them. They probably will try and should. And do I think it will necessarily trickle down? No, I would love it if it did. But I think for people kind of doing more independent, smaller movies at that stage, I don't know that that's going to be something we'll see, at least for a while.
Yeah. But it is about what leverage you do have. Even as an independent filmmaker, if you own the script, you start with the highest leverage if people want that script. If you're the director, if the actors are in this movie because of you, that's a lot of firepower that you have to make certain demands to your financiers, to your partners, to your distributors. we saw the old case studies with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, with Good Will Hunting, with Sylvester Stallone, with Rocky. Like, those outliers do happen, and I think this is another example of that, just on a higher pedestal where he was already a studio director.
I think, as always, you have to understand what the goal for your project is and what leverage you have, right? So if you want to hang on to rights, but then the film isn't get distributed, that's a conscious choice. And does that make sense based on where you are in your career? So it's, understanding what the perception is and what actual leverage you have. Know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
Yeah, and I also think it's being creative. It may not necessarily be that exact thing, but if you look at what happened with Bluey, they kept the merchandising, and Disney is not happy about that because they make so much money off of their merchandising. And apparently in their team, when somebody's trying to negotiate deals now for merchandise, they're like, don't pull a Bluey. So it's something where there's different ways where you can look at other things that may not be necessarily gross or whatever, but there could be other options where you can be creative about the rights you have and what you can keep for yourself that you can take advantage of and make more money from.
Yeah, I guess it's a great lesson in creativity, even if it's, as an independent producer and a new producer, that's probably not necessarily something you would think about, but it's a lesson in creativity and leverage, basically. So, great. I guess we're there. Unless there's anything you guys want to mention we haven't discussed.
Shall we take questions from the audience?
Let's do it. Please.
I have so many questions. First of all, I don't know if I should start with this question because it might put a kibosh on things, but what do you think about these crazy tariffs Trump wants to put on? I mean, you just said it's wonderful to film internationally now, and that has been the trend, 100%. But do you think this is serious or?
Well, we've had a couple of clients that, out of pure precaution, have actually moved from the country they were looking at back into the States and are adjusting. So that is something that is happening, and it's interesting because he's already making an effect, whether that was the intent or not there. But I think that what I think will probably happen is somewhere in the middle. It may not be a tariff necessarily, but I do think I know there are conversations happening that are really pushing towards it, and I do actually think will be helpful towards it. And I am getting the impression that tariffs will not be as scary as we all initially thought. But you also never know anymore.
Yeah, I guess if I may say something about it, I think it's something, at least that's my experience, that people are not necessarily busy with. It's pretty much business as usual. There's so much to do and there's so many alternatives. But I do think it sort of brings up a discussion about the state of the industry in the US, and maybe more specifically California, where, for example, a discussion about a federal tax incentive, that would actually be an interesting discussion. But that's my point of view. I don't know if Grady.
No, agreed. I think the intention was good. It was to, we all recognize that production is leaving LA, it's leaving California and the States. So how do we bring that back? Tariffs is not the right answer, but it is one tool that's been exercised in other realms of government that's worked. So
I do think a federal incentive is a great idea.
Yeah.
We all want that. Yes, all of us want that.
Yeah. Great. Who else?
Katie from FilmUSA is advocating heavily for that.
Hello, thank you very much. And my question is also about international productions. My name is Ines Kraft, I'm from Cyprus. And you mentioned that you're willing to film something in other countries, for example. So what makes countries attractive to financiers, to producers when you're thinking of filming internationally? And my dream is to connect Cyprus and Hollywood. So I'm willing to know what is the most attractive for you.
Money.
In which sense?
Yeah, I mean, in the literal sense. Yeah, I think. I mean, first off, right? Like, there's times where I personally had a film go somewhere because of the movie. Like, we shot a film in Rome a couple years ago, and we just happened to get a villa for free, and so it was like, let's just shoot a movie in Rome off a 30-page treatment. And that made sense. We did Joyland in Pakistan because it is inherently a Pakistani story. Why would we go anywhere else? And then this movie we're doing this summer in Malta, it's because we're getting more than half of the budget from Malta, and it financially makes sense. So I think there's different reasons there of why it was important to me, and there's not always this like perfect box you're gonna fit in for that. But I would say most people will probably be the financial.
Okay, Petra Terzi from Greece and Cyprus, and I would like to ask the financiers what is the demanded ROI, return of investment, in order to invest in film production or TV series.
Did you say ROI or LOI?
ROI.
A return,
Okay.
a percentage
I think
on the money you are going to invest.
Most equity investors, I think the standard is 20% on their principal, and they can wait a little bit longer to see their returns. I think independent financiers like BondIt are, we're less expensive than 20%, but we're more expensive than banks because we take a secured position at the top of the waterfall where we'll get taken out before the equity, right after the movie wraps, when it delivers to the buyers, and we're looking for like 15% returns. And then when you get to the banks, they're charging, bank rates 6, 7, 8% single digits, and they require completion bonds and other controls that add elements to the budget in terms of cost.
That means if we add all these percentages,
It depends on the type of financing you're getting.
Yes,
Yeah.
and okay, my understanding is that I'm not in this monetary now business and calculation, that half of the budget can be ruled, controlled by the financiers, right?
Yeah, it could be
a net 20%
Yeah.
at least.
Sure. It goes back to the point about leverage, is if the equity investor is providing that much money, or they're fully funding the budget, just like a streamer, if they fully fund the project, they're going to take ownership. They're probably going to have a lot more control. They have everything to lose by putting money into your movie. As that finance plan breaks down into 5, 10, 15 different executive producers, then you're making individual deals with each party and making sure that they all play nice with the waterfall structure.
David's job.
And just I guess it completely depends on the sort of financing, on the sort of film you're making, waterfall. That's basically how the recoupment schedules, or how eventually will monies be distributed amongst the beneficiaries, so whomever is entitled to receive a part of the revenues. And of course, that's for financiers. It's very important that the waterfall, the recoupment schedule works. But yeah, to Grady's point, it depends completely on the sort of film you're financing, right? Cool. Any other questions? Anybody else?
I have one quick.
Please.
In regard to Italy and France, you mentioned Italy is very difficult. And I heard that France might be a little easier. I've heard, we're on a scout on the beginnings of my film that is involved in Italy, and they're always suggesting we come back to the Victorine studios in Nice to film and just do key locations in Italy, because there's so much red tape. But then I do hear that there are public places you can actually go to and film at. Have you heard about that, or the differences between Italy and France? I know with My Brilliant Friend, mine's a TV series, they built a whole stage. And is that what's required because it's so difficult to get into the nooks and crannies of Italy?
I don't see the French credit all that often, and I think the reason is there's financiers within certain countries that are more familiar with the credits and legislation and how to get through that red tape. So you have French banks, you have Italian production companies that know how to navigate it.
Yes.
And for those reasons, typically American investors and financiers, we stay out of it if we can. Yeah. Any experience from your side?
We haven't financed those, so.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe with all these foreign territories, something maybe to add. And money is very important. So the tax credit, access and bureaucracy, but also availability of crews and qualified people. To the point of stage 32, basically.
Yes.
That's something, and I guess you agree, or if you disagree, let me know. But the availability of qualified people. So if you look at countries, I would think like Hungary or Spain, which have a very long history, and there's even there might be a battle for the best crews, etc. That's also probably a consideration. Right? Or how do you see?
At the very least, it's a consideration of timing, but it can sometimes mean you might need to move if you have to shoot within a certain time frame. But we were supposed to shoot this summer in Malta, and we decided to push to the fall because the better crew is available then, and it is actually cheaper because it's off season. So yes, it definitely can affect it.
I think this is a consideration for anywhere you're going, whether it's a country or state, is what else is filming around that time. And there are things like Production Weekly that you can check, because certain crews may be taken up by a bigger studio film, or they'll work for longer duration than your independent film that shoots in 3 or 4 weeks. So you also have to think about who is available, what time of year you're going.
And one more point on that is there may be really juicy or attractive incentives in these rural locations, but you're going to lose the experienced crew that you'd otherwise have in LA.
And that's where you're comparing the incentives of what the requirements are versus what you have to bring. Like some places you can bring certain heads, have to like HODs, but then others you really need to use the crew that they have. So it depends on that too.
Yeah, that's where education and training comes in, and stage 32 comes in.
The best.
And the circle goes round, right? So, yeah, any other questions?
Hi, thank you for the panel. Sorry. Other than industry validation, what are some ways you've seen first-time or second-time directors de-risk their own projects? Like, do you like to see a little bit of skin in the game? Do you like a director-producer? Do you like, what are some examples other than the classic industry validation?
I mean, skin in the game is
Yeah,
great.
that's what I was gonna say.
Like pretty much the best one, because then we're aligned, right?
Yeah.
Our alignments as a financier and yours, we're all working towards the same goal, and that would be to finish the film on budget, on time, have a deliverable quality that a distributor is going to want to buy. So that I always, as a financier, feel much, especially as debt, because we're going to sit in front of you in the waterfall. That always makes me feel a little bit better.
Any other questions? Anybody else? No questions? Everybody knows what a waterfall is? No, just kidding.
They're beautiful. There's some over here.
Yeah. So yeah, then guys, thank you very much for doing this panel together, and yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.